Happy evening to everybody tuning in. I'm Clarissa Constantine. I'm the founder of the Parent Tween Connection, which is where parents go when they don't know where to go. And one of the ways that we help families navigate life with teenagers and help you navigate those WTAF moments with them is by bringing in professionals like today's guest, Becca Stackhouse-Morson, to chat about a wide array of topics relative to life with teens and tweens. So, Becca, first things first, thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here.
Awesome. So Becca is a certified family life educator, and she is the founder of Stacked Intent. Tell me a little bit first of all, about Stacked Intent and the support that you offer to families and parents and kiddos. And then we're going to talk about how to live authentically you.
So the Stacked Intent was kind of born out of, I just really find relationship education important. And through my background, through my professional world, I just found it as something that people sometimes miss. And so Stacked Intent is here to provide education to help people develop their authentic selves through growth, through life, through transitions. What drove me to it is my background and my education, and then just being authentically myself throughout life. And so I just found it as a great way to craft my business around it. And so I have programs that really help implement the relationship that you have with yourself, not and just forming the relationship with you have with yourself, and then how it implements into other relationships. And so
Absolutely.
I love to do that through in-person and virtual courses, speaking engagements. I've got some online resources and courses, but then I also have a weekly newsletter, blog, and then a podcast that all kind of cultivate around that healthy self relationship. And so it gives different tools and aspects in that way.
Awesome. All right. So the first part of our conversation today is we're going to be talking about mindset for an authentic self. And Becca actually has a slide set to go along with the conversation that we're having, but here's where we're headed, okay? We're going to be talking about how to discover the foundation of authenticity through self-awareness and radical self-acceptance. And I think radical self-acceptance may be the single hardest thing that some of us ever have to navigate. It's a lot easier to accept others for who and what they are and hold ourselves to sometimes somewhat higher standards. And so we're going to be chatting about tuning into our values and our desires, letting go of external expectations, embracing vulnerability, and cultivating a mindset that's focused on self-truth and inner peace. So that's kind of where we're headed, y'all. Stick close. And Becca, where do we start with this?
So we start with the mindset, and it's what you think of yourself. And so what we're going to kind of chat about is we're going to look through that. So this is just me, and that scan code kind of takes you to the QR as my introduction. But self-awareness. So when we launch in and we look at self-awareness, it's kind of where it starts. And this starts as a parent, as a teen. It kind of starts anywhere in the spectrum. And so self-awareness is looking at that ability to really understand and recognize what your own emotions are, look and recognize what your own thoughts are. It's even looking at your values and your behaviors. And those are things that can change. Our values and our behaviors don't necessarily stay the exact same throughout our whole life. And so it's really looking at just gaining the self-awareness of being aware of what your own emotions look like, what your own thoughts look like. And so it's being able to understand what your thoughts are you're having. It's being able to know what your values are. And that's even when you're looking into your beliefs. It's especially as a parent, you're kind of given the influence in the environment, but it's also allowing your children to be able to develop some of their own values and beliefs within that space that you're providing. And so that helps give
Can I interject?
you. Yeah.
Tell me your thinking on why it is that our values and our desires change. Because a lot of people will say, well, XYZ is my value. It always has been, it always will be. And yet we're saying something that maybe flies in the face of that concept. I agree with you, but I'm just curious what your perspective is on that.
My perspective is it comes from our different experiences sometimes. So our experiences may have changed or shifted something that happened. Or it may be that we heard what our parents were giving us, and we never really formed our own opinion, or
Mm-hmm.
or grew up in a house that it was one way at home and different outward, and so then we'd form a different belief or opinion. So there's all kinds of different ways that our values and beliefs might change and form. There's a core foundation of it that I do believe stays the same, because research shows that a lot of our habits and what we learn, it's established well before we hit our teen years. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got a lot of that foundation, but it also allows us to grow and develop into a healthy human being by allowing ourselves some of this change and shift.
Cool. All right, carry on. I just wanted to interject. Thank you for humoring me.
No, you're good. Go ahead, interject anytime. So the importance in the self-awareness is being able to have improved relationship, and that's with yourself, that's with your parents, that's with friends, that's with coworkers, like that's with everybody around you. It can also be a relationship with your food, it can be a relationship with your finances, it can be a relationship with your
Mm-hmm.
exercise, so it can help improve even there when you're aware. It's being able to manage your emotions. And I love the movie Inside Out. I just think it's
Mm-hmm.
great description of our brains. And so it's being able to manage those. Like if you've seen the second one, when anxiety took complete over, everything turned to total chaos. And so we have to
Mm-hmm.
have that balance of our emotions. It's being able to have that increased self-confidence, being able to look at your decision making. And then it kind of goes back to what you just asked of being able to have growth and development. If we truly stay the same from the time that we're the age of 5 all the way through our life spectrum, we're not really having any personal growth or development that's happening
Mm-hmm.
in my life. And so
Absolutely.
that's where self-awareness, it's just becoming aware of who you are and who you want to be. And that's where that part becomes really important.
Awesome. And I like the fact that you said that we need to, acknowledge that the younger folks in our world, our kids, our nieces, nephews, whatever, that, we need to give them the space to become their own people as well. And I think sometimes that's harder for us as adults because we see what we want to see and we want them to develop into what we want them to develop into. And sometimes we don't necessarily give them the autonomy to make those evaluations for themselves.
Oh yeah. And that's just what's important. It's giving them the tools, but giving them the space at the same time, which is not always an easy balance.
Nope, not in the least. So where do we go from the self-awareness?
Then we look at acceptance. And so acceptance is really looking at helping your involve of embracing your aspects of yourself, whether it's positive or negative. Because when we're looking at this mindfulness of our authentic self, we got to be able to look at the positive and negative. So there might be positive things, but there also might be negative. And so this one is like, it's helpful when you're understanding what you are basics. It's being able to embrace all parts of yourself, whether it's a challenging thing about you, whether it's a great thing, but it's being able to see those. And you might have to sit in some uncomfortableness to be able to accept an aspect that you might not love and take it from somebody that loves you who might be trying to help you make that shift of, hey, here's a character trait I found that you might
Mhm.
not love about yourself. Like for me, one that I've figured out over the years was, so my mom homeschooled all of us. And she would give us a schedule of what our schedule was going to look like. And then that was kind of how we were supposed to do it. Well, my brother and sister, that was effective. Me, it became, but this is what you said. So she began to like break mine. She would rearrange my schedule in the day. And what I found as I got older, it helped me because I'm able to step back sometimes and go, okay, so we have to reevaluate the schedule. Now, if my mom had never helped me do that in a way I
Mhm.
didn't realize at the time, I probably would have a really hard time accepting schedule changes now. And so it's something that might
Mhm.
be negative, something that might be positive, and it's being able to kind of find what that balance is.
Well, and I even think, one of the foundations that we focus on with the foundations of connection is non-judgment.
Mhm.
And, even saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, or it's a positive or a negative, like, the thought that comes up for me is, like, according to whose standards and according to whose judgment, because maybe something that is, a challenge for me is actually something that would be beneficial in your world, or vice versa, something like that. Like, you're looking at, like, your kids behave in a certain way that is quote unquote bad, but by whose standards? Now, granted, there are societal, moral, whatever type standards, but aside from those, right? But, like, well, you didn't get your homework done on time. Like, is that necessarily or you didn't start earlier when I think you should have? Is that necessarily a bad thing or a good thing? We don't necessarily have to have the same metrics.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. And that's part of that. Once you have the self awareness, being able to have that acceptance, then you start to learn to be able to have the conversation about it.
Hmm.
Of, I understand that's how it works for you, but this is how it works for me. And that's a balance that can be hard to find, but it's
Hmm.
important. It's important in being able to cultivate what that self acceptance looks like, because our self acceptance comes from self
Absolutely.
compassion. It comes from forgiveness of yourself. So you didn't start your homework on time, or you didn't start it when you might have needed to. It's being able to forgive yourself and move forward to be able to then do what's
Hmm.
next.
Hmm.
Challenging negative self
All
talk.
right.
That, yeah.
No, I was going to say, what was the next point that you wanted to get to? So that challenging negative self-talk is a doozy sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Because self-talk, it takes up like 85% of what we say to ourselves
Hmm.
versus positive. And so when people wake up in the morning, if you think about it, were you negative to yourself when you first woke up? It depends on
Hmm.
how you woke up for your day. And then it's looking at what some of your strengths may be. How can you really cultivate your strengths? Is being able to acknowledge what limitations
Absolutely.
and then embrace what happened. So if something's happened in your past, it's being able to embrace and accept that and learn from that decision. And then it's being able to look at some goals and then shift your mindset to being able to separate from your failures and even your achievements to be able to really embrace who you are in those.
Hmm. And that also ties into letting go of external expectations, right? Like, again, like, according to whose standards? Is it based on what mom and dad said was okay? Is it okay, even as an adult, what your parents will accept in you or in your family? Is it about what society says? Is it about what the school says? Is it about what your boss says? Is it about what your church says? Whatever the case may be, what are those external expectations and how do they jive with the priorities that you hold for yourself?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And it's very much looking at that of being able to accept the all around.
Hmm.
And that takes us to looking at like what our true values are, what our beliefs are, and then what our desires are from there. And that can be simple, but it can also be complicated, especially if you've grown up in a certain situation and you might be challenging some of those, challenging
Hmm.
some of what you've grown up with. And so it's learning to be okay with it. It's learning to really, really love who you are and what makes you who you are.
And that definitely takes some introspection. I've done numerous values exercises. You can go on Google and you can search values exercise. And this is interesting to do individually, but also if you're in partnership or if you have kids who are old enough to start understanding what values are and choosing some of their own, figuring out what your family values are. But there's a fair amount of introspection that's kind of required to do this. And then talk to me about the beliefs. How do we evaluate those?
Those are a challenge, and it can depend on where you are regionally, of what area of the country that you've grown up in, or where you've
Hmm.
grown up, of what's been more influential. I mean, I grew up more in your southern states, and so you grow up with a lot of the Bible Belt of
Hmm.
church are very much influential of how things go day in and day out, whereas that's not as common the further north you go. And so it's looking at, okay, here are the beliefs I might have been taught as a child. Is this still what I believe? And if it is, that can be perfectly fine. But are there some things for me that don't line up with what I might have been taught? And am I okay standing up against that? Am I
Hmm.
okay being different than what my parents might expect me to be. And that's part of finding that self-acceptance.
So then what about desires? I mean, I desire ice cream, and I'm going to guess that's not quite what you're meaning here.
Hey, I desire ice cream too, and I had my husband go get it with me the other day. So,
No such thing as too cold for ice cream.
not here. So, desires are things that you might have a strong feeling to, something that you might wish is happening. It can be a strong want. And so it's really looking at, does this desire line up with my authentic self? So, does my desire to go out to a movie late at night with friends when I have a test tomorrow, does that line up, and is it okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or if education is really important to you, is this relationship that I might be in a partnership, is this going to allow me to pursue the job I want or the career I want or the education and still be able to have a healthy balance of a relationship? So it's finding that balance between what you are and not really allowing other people to steal it away from you. And if you're okay giving something up, but it's allowing for your desires to not overtake, but allow you to get to what some of your goals might be.
Awesome. So once we've got those, what's the next step?
That's when you start to really embrace who you truly are. And so that's really looking at who you are as your authentic self. And that's going back to the, have you accepted what you love about yourself? Have you accepted your faults? Because we all have faults. None of us are perfect. We all have something that's gonna not be great, that we might not like about ourselves, but it contributes to who we are. It contributes to what we are. And so it's being able to really look at that, and it's being able to embrace that and love it. And it's things like, do you like to go outdoors and go on hikes? If that's something that you truly love about yourself, getting in a group that just wants to sit inside and play video games, that's not going to help you embrace your authenticity. And so it's really looking at that part of yourself.
Love it.
And then it's fostering that deep connection. It's fostering what that connection with yourself looks like to be more fulfilling. And so that's kind of where you can cultivate your authentic mindset of really looking at it. It's how you can really start to reflect on what some experiences might have been or some emotions. It's doing something like journaling. I have found journaling to be a very powerful tool, because instead of it just being thoughts that go through your mind, you then get to see it written out. It's that tool that helps you explore what your inner world looks like. It helps you identify patterns. It can help you go back and reflect on the beliefs and seeing if those are really serving back to who your true self is. It can also look like things like meditating and being mindful. And so that's being able to stay present and connected within your voice of your inner self and being able to listen to yourself, because we all have conversations with ourselves in some way or some form, whether you're talking out loud to yourself or not. Journaling is one way of communicating with yourself. And
My dad used to say, "I'm one of the smartest people I know. Why wouldn't I have a conversation with myself?"
it's funny. There was I had an idea not too long ago, and my husband goes, "Well, who'd you talk to?" I said, "Me, myself, and I." And we had a great conversation about it.
Absolutely.
Thought it was a good idea to bring to the table. And so it is. You have to have some self-reflection, and you have to sit in some silence for that to happen. Like, you be okay being in the quiet sometimes.
Right. So then how does vulnerability tie into this? I love Brené Brown. She talks a ton about vulnerability and being open and being willing to acknowledge those faults, the things that, make us imperfectly or perfectly imperfect rather, and rather human. But where do you see that coming in as an integral part of connection with self or with others?
With self, if you're not vulnerable with yourself, you're not going to find the true, you may not see the trueness of who you are or what your beliefs are. And how that comes in with others is it puts you up to possibly be hurt. Like we
Mm.
might get hurt in the process of being vulnerable with somebody, but not always.
Mhm.
And so it's just finding what that, because when you're being vulnerable, it can be something that's physical, it can be in a social setting, it can be in your environmental factors. And so you can either be doing that as yourself, you can do it in a community, you can do it on a team that you're on. Like there's lots of ways that we can be vulnerable. And so it comes with, I think that when you are more vulnerable, you have to be more connected with yourself of how
Mhm.
you are and what you love about yourself. And that plays right into who you surround yourself with. Like
Mhm.
of how you surround yourself with your support and the people who you have that see your genuine self, because we typically have different circles of people. We have those people
Mhm.
close to us, we might have our family, then we go out, and then you have acquaintances. You're not the same person with your acquaintances as you are with your inner people. And so
Sure.
that's where your vulnerability might change, is you might be more vulnerable in this small circle than you are with your big circle of acquaintances. And that's okay.
Well, and I've actually found sometimes that the exact opposite is true because I care more about what my inner circle thinks about me or, how they evaluate me. Will they, turn me out of the pack, as it were, if I say or do something that is unacceptable to them, going back to the whole idea of external expectations. Whereas with people that I don't know nearly as well, I can be like, dude, here's who I am. And if like take it or leave it, I feel in some cases it's a lot easier to have that mentality with people that I just don't care as much in turn, not that I don't care about them as humans, but I don't, their opinions don't influence me quite as much.
No, that it totally does happen sometimes too, especially when you go to something that like gives you this so I do jujitsu, and jujitsu is one of those places that you have people from all kinds of walks of life that show up on the mat. But the vulnerability that and trust that you're putting into everybody that
Mhm.
you may not have met at all is you're trusting that they're not going to break your ankle when you tap, because
Right.
that's the language of it. And so yeah, it can definitely be sometimes with strangers you're a lot more vulnerable because you don't know what they think versus you know what your inner circle thinks, and so it can
Mhm.
go both ways. But it's why it's important to surround ourselves with people that can help us too.
Mhm. So then, where do we go from here?
Then we just have to remember that it's okay to say no to things. So it's okay if something isn't aligned with your authentic self and who you want to be, that it's okay to say no. Ultimately, as we're living to be in our authentic self and in our journey, it's a journey. It's not a
Mhm.
final destination we get to. It's a journey that we get to recreate. We get to change it as we change and as we develop and as we grow. We get to continue it as a journey. We don't have to
Mhm.
just be like, oh, here's our dead end. And so it's that continuous evolving of figuring out who you are and who you want to be and being able to grow and change and staying true to yourself as you go through that involvement by embracing who you want to be, by opening doors that give you joy and give you
Mhm.
empowerment in your life.
So with this leading into that idea of self-truth and inner peace, I can hear people in my head responding to us going, well, this is fine and well for everybody else, but I've got a partner, I've got kids, I've got a job, all the things that are valid statements, right? They are truths. And yet I hear people going that because of these circumstances, they feel like what we're talking about here and now isn't approachable for them. What's like, how do we bridge that gap? Because sometimes it feels like it's a bridge too far.
Oh, yeah, it does. And it's, you find somebody that can support you, whether it's in that inner circle, whether it's a group that you find, whether it's a coach that you find that helps you, whether it's some self help books, and you start the journey. Because If you can't feel to your authenticity, then you do. I believe that you struggle in everything else, and so you're not showing up as your best partner. You're
Mhm.
not showing up as your best parent. You're not showing up as your best sibling. You're not showing up as your best friend. Like you're just not showing up as your best if you can't reconnect to who you are. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. Like I went through so many
Mhm.
changes from like so when I launched Stacked Intent, I also had gotten married, moved states, changed jobs, changed careers, and then we had some loss that happened in that. And so it became a journey again. And it might happen for you when you have transitions. It might happen for you when one transition happens, but it might happen when you have a few happen. And
Mhm.
it's sometimes you have to get through the blunt of it. So you might be in the really hard part of it and get to the other side and then just start finding a small piece. Don't try to take the huge chunk of it. Find one thing. So, if you've never really journaled or you journaled a while ago, get back into journaling. If you find books helpful, find some books
Mhm.
to read that can help you and just start small. Don't try to take the whole chunk. Start small.
Mhm. And I think it's also important to recognize that this is not an overnight process. This is, the like you were saying, like, kind of breaking free, if you will, from what your parents believed, but you never necessarily evaluated as to whether that was the right feeling for you. Like, you may not have a reason to challenge those thoughts until your 20s or 30s, and then
Mhm.
something else happens, or you find a partner who has different beliefs again, or then you have a child who has certain experiences or just shows up as a human in a way that is outside of what you've ever experienced. I mean, I think that just goes without saying as a parent, for parents and children anyway, but sometimes there are, like, more noticeable differences than you might have expected, and all of those things force you to go back and really go, "Hey, what's important to me?" And if you've identified those values in the first place, I feel like that's a lot easier to navigate. Like, if you're parenting with the end in mind of, like, what kind of parent you wanna show up as, that can influence other beliefs and desires, or that desire rather can show up, can influence your values and your beliefs.
Oh yeah, that's so very true. And that's just it. Is it you might find yourself somewhere in your journey that you haven't had to look at it or address a situation. And so it's just finding the way to reflect and know that it's
Mhm,
okay to evaluate it. It's okay to figure it out. It's okay to come back to what it
mhm,
was that you believed and that be what you still believe.
mhm. Alright, so we're gonna wrap up. It looked like you had a final slide for anyone who might be interested in connecting with you or learning more about the offerings that you have. So if you're wherever you're tuning in, feel free to go ahead and do a quick scan of that QR code. But Becca, I've got one final question for you, and I totally didn't prep you for this, so my apologies in advance.
Oh,
But
fun.
I mentioned to you that a lot of what we do at Parent Tween Connection is based in what I call the foundations of connection. And stance to observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, explore, challenge your truths or curiosity, take your time, innovate, own your own story, and then nurture. And so I'm wondering which of those kind of like jumped out of the recording at you or off the video at you as being really important in this process of self awareness and self acceptance in order to get to authenticity and living our most authentic life.
I would have to go with own your own story. And that being because I started this year with deciding that self acceptance was going to be my word of the year, to only learn that that was going to look different than I thought it was going to look at the beginning of the year. But to really know that my story has an importance to it, whether it go from my
Mhm,
chronic disease of Crohn's that I've had for 12 and a half, 13 years now. Actually, I think it's longer than that, somewhere in there. But I've had for more than a decade, or whether it's been the journey of having a marriage and having a marriage the way that I wanted to have it, that it's healthy, good communication, or just it is of really, really loving the everyday that I've had. And so that's had to come with really owning my story and owning what it's looked like in the last couple of years, because there's been lots of change and it's different than what I thought it was going to look like at this point in my life.
Funny how that happens, isn't it?
It is.
Awesome.
It is.
All right. Well, Becca, thank you for joining me. For those of you who are tuning in, Becca and I are going to head over to the Parent Tween Village, and we're going to have a conversation that dives deeper. We're going to be talking about being intentionally you. We're going to talk about 9 essential traits for building a strong self image, tools for intentional self description, and some practical reflection strategies to nurture a healthier, more empowered you. So, if you're not a member of Parent Tween Village yet, you can find out more at parenttweenconnection.com. Those recordings are in the vault at Parent Tween Village. So, if you don't catch it live, you can absolutely catch a recording. And Becca, thank you so much for joining me and for your insights. And stand by, and we'll see you in Parent Tween Village shortly.
Thank you.